And is suing him for $100 million because of Shedeur Sanders falling to the 5th round of NFL.
There have been numerous lawsuit threats since Shedeur Sanders was drafted into the NFL. However, his most recent action just made matters worse. According to reports, Sanders inked a $250 million contract outside of the NFL. NFL owners are now retaliating fiercely. We have all the information. Let's dissect it. The revolutionary agreement that altered everything. On May 19, 2025, Shedeur Sanders, a 5th-round pick chosen 144th overall, signed a rookie contract with the Cleveland Browns for $4, which appeared to be simply another typical NFL transaction. $65 million. However, Sanders' contract contained a groundbreaking clause that would rock the NFL establishment and possibly permanently alter how professional athletes negotiate contracts.
Forever.
Shedeur Sanders has a prime equity clause. The prime equity clause gives Sanders a percentage of all revenue generated from merchandise, sponsorships, and promotion tied to his name, image, and life.
The most notable change in player-team power dynamics since the creation of free agency is represented by what became known as the prime equity clause. This unusual clause turns Sanders from a mere player into a commercial partner with the Cleveland Browns organization by giving him a portion of all sales from merchandise, sponsorships, and promotions associated with his name, image, and likeness. Although the precise proportion isn't made public, estimations based on reported earnings, 0.25 to 6%. This results in a commission-based system that completely upends conventional pay structures. We must look at what Sanders actually negotiated in comparison to his contemporaries in order to comprehend the scope of this breakthrough. Caleb Williams, Chicago's first overall pick, inked a $39 4-year contract, $25 and a $4 million contract. Sanders' base contract is quite modest, with a $5 million signing bonus, in addition to base earnings that increase yearly from $840,000 in 2025 to $1. His contract guarantees $447,000 through his signing bonus, $2 million in 2028. The 2011 collective bargaining agreement, which slots contracts based on draft position with little space for negotiation, established the NFL's rookie compensation scale. Sanders' deal, as a 5th-round pick, is a typical 4-year contract, minus the 5th team option that is only available to 1st-round picks. From their point of view, Sanders is a low-risk investment because the Browns may dismiss him after the first season with little dead cap consequence. But this risk-reward calculation is completely changed by the equity clause. But it's not the base numbers that make the Sanders contract remarkable. It's the equity clause, which has already started to pay rewards in amounts far greater than those of a typical NFL rookie. According to reports, Sanders' rookie jersey sales have reached $250 million, earning him $14 million in commission, much more than both his 4-year base salary and the salaries of the majority of seasoned quarterbacks in their debut season.
Paid off. Shedeur's rookie jersey has reportedly hit $250 million in sales, earning him $14 million in commission, which far exceeds most rookies.
This clause has a clever legal construction. It is designed as a revenue-sharing arrangement that is considered as business income rather than player salary, which keeps it consistent with current collective bargaining agreement standards. Rather than getting around the NFL's salary ceiling, a new model for how players might draft future contracts is created by the clause, which gives Sanders an estimated 5 to 6% of Browns' nil-related revenue from jerseys, sponsorships, and digital material. The provision covers a wide range of financial areas, such as jersey sales, clothing goods, advertising slogans, and digital content associated with the Sanders brand, because Sanders' personal brand generates item sales that the team would never have made with a standard 5th-round choice. This generates several revenue streams that are advantageous to both Sanders and the Browns. In essence, the deal turns Sanders from a burden on the salary ceiling into a profit center. However, the most intriguing part of Sanders' agreement goes beyond just monetary recompense. He is granted complete ownership of all of his personal media content and digital platforms, including his Twitch, YouTube, and Instagram channels, under the terms of the deal. In professional sports, where clubs usually keep tight control over athlete messaging and content, this degree of media control is practically unparalleled. Professional athletes' ability to control their narratives has fundamentally changed as a result of the media rights component. Conventional NFL contracts frequently contain provisions that grant teams considerable influence over players' public appearances and social media usage. By giving the Browns access to the money made through his channels, Sanders' agreement reverses this dynamic and gives him total editorial control over his content.
But Bucky is able to be behind the scenes that way because it's in Shedeur's contract that he controls his own media. Why? Why would Shedeur want to control his own media? Because then I can paint my own narratives, and then I can let you guys hear my.
More astonishingly, the contract included a special NFL media rights provision that permits Shedeur's half-brother, Deion Sanders Jr., to create behind-the-scenes footage, thereby integrating his own media team into the professional framework. The fact that NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell had to give his own specific consent for this clause demonstrated how unusual these negotiations were. Sanders Jr. has unprecedented access to his own professional work thanks to the partnership, which permits him to produce content that NFL copyright enforcement would often identify and erase. Another level of intricacy is added by the tax ramifications of Sanders' particular contract structure. Because the equity clause revenues are regarded as company income, Sanders is required to pay self-employment taxes, in addition to potentially claiming business deductions. Compared to regular player pay, this results in a more complex tax situation, but it may provide larger long-term financial benefits through investment opportunities and business expense deductions. When we take into account Sanders' larger endorsement portfolio, which smoothly moved from his undergraduate nil arrangements to professional contracts, the financial ramifications become even more startling. His connection with Nike, which could be worth $5 to $10 million a year, is only one aspect of his endorsement empire, which also includes agreements with Mercedes, Gatorade, Beats by Dre, and Urban Outfitters. His collegiate nil valuation of about $6 was leveraged by these $5 million a year, facilitating a smooth transition to possible professional income.
In business, people understand how valuable your own platform is, especially because it builds and it grows over time. And in this situation, right, him retaining full ownership of all his personal media content, that means he can post in
Sanders' entire first-year compensation, including his equity clause earnings, is believed to be between $18 and $37 million, making him possibly the highest-paid rookie in NFL history, even though they were chosen in the 5th round. This earning potential competes with seasoned professionals and shows how, in the current sports environment, personal branding can go beyond conventional performance measurements. Innovative agreements in a variety of sports can be linked to the historical precedent for Sanders' contract structure. The model for sportsmen taking part in product revenue was set by Michael Jordan's 1984 Nike contract, which included royalties from Air Jordan sales. Similar to this, image rights terms worth about €20 million a year were incorporated in Cristiano Ronaldo's Real Madrid contract, showing how international celebrities might profit from their personal brands within club structures. This striking discrepancy between draft position and earning potential highlights a fundamental change in the NFL's current method of determining player worth. Sanders' contract shows how social media presence, cultural influence, and personal branding can provide value streams that go beyond traditional club structures, whereas traditional measures only consider on-field performance and draft stock. This evolution is much more important in light of the historical background. In comparison to quarterbacks like Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, Sanders' draft drop from a predicted top 10 pick to 144th overall cost him over $44 million in traditional deal worth. However, he may make more money in his first year than both of those higher drafted players, because to creative contract structuring and the use of his personal brand.
Why they hate Shedeur Sanders. This is what it's about, man. It's that the things that he's coming in negotiating have never been done before. They always want it, and they like it for players to stay in a position of service.
It is impossible to overestimate the precedent this establishes. As the first NFL rookie to successfully negotiate equity participation in team earnings linked to his own brand, Sanders' deal sets a precedent that other athletes in all sports are likely to follow. The provision allows athletes to preserve and profit from their own brands even within the constrictive parameters of professional sports contracts, thereby bridging the gap between collegiate nil chances and professional compensation structures. It is evident that Sanders and his negotiation team, headed by his father, Deion Sanders, have significantly changed the landscape of professional sports contracts as we consider the wider ramifications of this historic agreement. However, this groundbreaking agreement wasn't made in a vacuum. Just as contentious as his contract itself is the narrative of how Sanders became available in the 5th round. The contentious draft slide and claims of collaboration. One of the most stunning quarterback slips in recent memory preceded Shedeur's groundbreaking contract. Allegations of organized resistance followed, sparking legal challenges and contentious discussions about structural problems inside the NFL.
And it's suing him for $100 million because of Shedeur Sanders falling to the 5th round of NFL draft, claiming emotional distress, trauma, and other things.
With some mock drafts ranking him as high as 1st overall to the Miami Dolphins or 2nd to the Las Vegas Raiders, Sanders entered the 2025 selection cycle as a predicted top 10 choice. He had an amazing 72 in college. In his final season at Colorado, he recorded a 169 with a 3% completion rate, 4,134 yards, 37 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. A passing score of 1. He was ranked among the top QB prospects based on these statistics. Nevertheless, Sanders would see 143 names mentioned before his own despite these statistical accomplishments and his well-known college career. This fall had a disastrous immediate financial consequence. Sanders might have made around $48 as a predicted 1st overall choice. $8 million with a $32 spread over 4 years. A signing bonus of $2 million. His deal would have been worth about $46 even if he had been selected with the 2nd overall pick. $6 million with a guarantee of about $30 million. Rather, the meager $4 came from his 5th round choice. $65 million transaction, which amounts to an astounding $44 million reduction in the usual contract value. Similar to guys like Brady Quinn in 2007 or Geno Smith in 2013, this slip is among the most dramatic quarterback falls in modern draft history, even though neither of those players met Sanders' pre-selection expectations. However, what led to such a sharp decline? The justifications vary from reasonable football-related worries to more alarming claims of concerted opposition. Several areas of concern were identified in scouting reports. Inconsistent deep pass accuracy, a propensity to hold the ball too long, which led to 52 sacks in 2023, and concerns about his capacity to adjust from Colorado's straightforward offensive scheme to intricate NFL schemes. He was seen by some evaluators as a system quarterback who flourished in Colorado's spread offense, but could find it difficult to handle the intricacy of the NFL. Other warning signs from the 2025 NFL Combine added to his decline. Sanders, on the other hand, had good physical measurements at 6 feet 2 inches and 215 pounds with a 4. His 40-yard sprint time of 78 seconds was criticized by several teams during his interviews. According to sources, he came across as overconfident, and several clubs thought he was entitled or haughty. Teams questioned his coachability and team-first approach due to his emphasis on franchise control, which included selecting coaches or strategies, according to anonymous general managers. Another complicating issue was the dynamics of Sanders' family. Some teams were offended by Deion Sanders' public remarks, which included assertions that Shedeur would reject specific teams, especially those in chilly climates like Cleveland. The family was chastised by NFL greats Kurt Warner and Chris Carter for overplaying their hand because Deion's media presence was perceived as a distraction that organizations wished to avoid. As a result, there was a notion that drafting Shedeur required coping with persistent family meddling in the media. However, claims of widespread conspiracy among NFL organizations are at the heart of the most explosive allegations concerning Sanders' draft slip. High-profile members of the football community have magnified these charges, sparking a controversy that goes far beyond standard selection analysis and touches on more complex concerns of league governance and possibly discriminatory behavior.
Here's the thing that I heard, I was like, this is interesting. Because there's this maybe collusion angle that goes on with Shedeur Sanders. Like, how does a 1st-round talent go to the 5th round? And there's really no reference points we have. There's a few out there, but they weren't graded as high, supposedly, as Shedeur.
The most serious accusation was made by NFL Hall of Famer Eric Dickerson, who claimed on the Ron and Rodney show that a reliable source told him that the NFL told teams not to draft Sanders in order to punish him for treating the pre-draft process more like recruitment than a job interview. Dickerson claimed that even the Browns were first told not to choose Sanders, but were later persuaded to do so by an unidentified source. Rather than individual team choices, this accusation points to concerted league-wide opposition. Boomer Esiason, a former NFL MVP, fueled these accusations by claiming that several owners specifically told teams not to select Sanders. According to ESPN's Stephen A. Smith, the owners made it apparent that they didn't want Sanders. He compared the scenario to collusion at the level of Colin Kaepernick and implied that animosity at Deion Sanders' influence was a major factor. According to Smith's accusations, owners coordinated their opposition to Sanders through private communications and text messaging. The accusations escalated to the point where legal action was initiated. A Colorado Buffaloes fan sued the NFL for $100 million in May 2025, claiming racial discrimination under the Civil Rights Act, antitrust breaches under the Sherman Act, and collusion that caused emotional distress. Access to scouting reports, internal correspondence, and a purported 61-page arbitration report on collusion against black quarterbacks are also demanded in the lawsuit. It shows how seriously some people take the accusations, even though legal experts think the action will probably be dismissed as baseless.
He would only have something if he could prove collusion.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
But not liking him isn't collusion.
Well,
that's not collusion. You have your right to not draft somebody because you don't like them.
According to reports, Sanders and his management made pre-draft demands that gave teams further justification to steer clear of him. These included assurances of playing time, offensive plans adapted to Sanders' preferences, and even control over hiring decisions. Most importantly, his insistence on the prime equity clause caused teams to worry that they were creating a precedent that would drastically change how they negotiate contracts with players in the future. These expectations were apparently seen by some teams as excessive for a collegiate player who had not yet established himself in the professional ranks. Even organizations that could have been interested in Sanders' talent level opposed him, because they believed he was demanding the first overall choice despite doubts about his NFL preparation. An essential background for assessing these allegations is provided by comparisons to earlier instances of suspected NFL collusion. The 2017 Colin Kaepernick case demonstrated that NFL owners could work together to blacklist a player. As evidence of coordinated resistance surfaced, Kaepernick's lawsuit was settled for millions. When there is hard proof of cooperation, the case set a precedent for establishing NFL collusion. In a similar vein, Lamar Jackson's 2023 free agency raised concerns about possible collusion, especially in light of organizations' opposition to fully guaranteed contracts. Even though Jackson eventually signed a record contract with Baltimore, there were similar concerns of concerted resistance because of the drawn-out process and the league's apparent unwillingness to comply with his demands.
Cocky, arrogant, then they're going to start and play it. They're going to OJ Glove it, and it's going to turn into some whole different issue because a black, confident, arrogant kid that's not liked for no other reason but just because I don't like him.
The accusation's racial component further complicates Sanders' predicament. Black quarterbacks have historically been underappreciated or subjected to more scrutiny than their white colleagues, according to critics. Beyond just football considerations, Sanders' draft stock may have been impacted by unconscious biases brought on by his self-assured manner and his family's prominent campaigning. But not everyone agrees with the story of collaboration. Sports Illustrated's Albert Breyer has refuted allegations of conspiracy, attributing the decline to real worries like bad interviews, family meddling, and performance problems, especially Sanders' sack-prone playing style. According to Breyer, clubs passed on Sanders for legitimate football-related reasons that didn't call for collusion or cooperation. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle of pure happenstance and systematic plot. Many teams were uneasy because of Sanders' unique combination of talent, attitude, family circumstances, and unheard-of contract demands. It's unclear if this unease amounted to organized conspiracy, but the situation undoubtedly gave Sanders the chance to fall far enough for Cleveland to choose him and accept his groundbreaking deal arrangement.
I think it would be hard to prove that part of it. It does. It is interesting, though, when you talk about Shedeur, that when you look at the league's website, and you're not on social, but this stuff, when he got drafted, it was pinned on NFL.
It is impossible to exaggerate how ironic Sanders' circumstances are. It's possible that the same elements that contributed to his draft decline ultimately worked to his advantage. He ended up with a team that was prepared to negotiate his groundbreaking contract conditions after dropping to the 5th round, possibly earning more in his first year than he would have as a top 10 pick. This result implies that for individuals who are prepared to think imaginatively about value generation, apparent setbacks might occasionally present unanticipated possibilities. When Sanders started his professional career with Cleveland, the circumstances surrounding his selection created both opportunities and challenges that would define not only his rookie season but also the NFL establishment's pushback, future implications, and possibly the future of player empowerment in professional sports. The NFL's reaction to Shedeur Sanders' groundbreaking contract has been a masterclass in institutional resistance, exposing the underlying conflicts between established power structures and the new reality of player empowerment. What began as a single rookie's creative contract has grown into a larger struggle over professional sports' future, with ramifications that go well beyond football and into the core bond between players and the businesses they represent. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, an unlikely source, provided the most telling sign of establishment worry. Goodell made a seemingly harmless remark in a widely shared video exchange with Deion Sanders, but it had deeper ramifications about the league's concern over Sanders' power and the potential precedent his son's deal would create for future talks.
Hey, big guy. What's going on? Hey, look. You doing all right? You gotta let my brother have his way in the league. I'm worried about your pop. What you worried about him for?
I'm worried about your pop.
The NFL's sincere concern about Deion Sanders' involvement in changing player negotiations is evident in this seemingly informal chat. Shedeur's on-field performance is not the commissioner's concern. His father's economic skill and willingness to question established organizations set the trend. Because Deion uses his commercial acumen and insider knowledge of NFL operations to take advantage of structural flaws in conventional contract structures, his influence poses a danger to the status quo. Jimmy Haslam, the owner of the Cleveland Browns, has responded in a way that is quite instructive and illustrates the internal organizational conflict brought about by granting Sanders extraordinary requests. In the midst of draft outrage, Haslam reportedly distanced himself from the Sanders pick despite his team's intensive pre-draft hosting of Sanders. According to reports, he may still seek Arch Manning even though Sanders is under contract. This points to internal organizational conflict about meeting Sanders' extraordinary requests while controlling conventional expectations and possible backlash from other NFL owners. The possible domino effect of Sanders' contract structure, especially with regard to cost inflation and the absence of conventional control systems, is the main source of concern for the larger NFL ownership group. According to anonymous reports, some owners detest the condition since it could lead to cost inflation and decentralization of control. There's more to the anxiety than Sanders. It concerns what will happen if experienced veterans or the next consensus first-round pick want comparable revenue-sharing arrangements.
You run fast, you jump high, you say yes sir, no sir, and we'll tell you what you're allowed to have. You don't believe that? Go look at Jerry Jones and Micah Parsons. Right now.
In between them, the opposition goes beyond financial worries to basic issues with narrative management and media control, which NFL organizations have historically fiercely defended. The NFL's historically strict control over player communications and content is directly challenged by Sanders' decision to keep his own media rights. The league's unprecedented acceptance of Deion Sanders Jr. Gear's media rights arrangement necessitated Commissioner Goodell's personal intervention and raised concerns about similar requests in the future. In Sanders' situation, this media element has been especially helpful since it has given him the ability to manage his story during difficult times like preseason setbacks or inquiries about team relationships. Instead of the league's favored messaging, Sanders' personal media team can offer background and viewpoint that supports his interests when circumstances might be framed unfavorably by standard NFL media organizations. In NFL circles, the legal ramifications of Sanders' contract have also raised serious concerns, especially in relation to possible challenges to current labor systems. The NFLPA has been keeping an eye on the clause's execution, not to oppose it but to see how other players can profit from similar agreements. Team management, however, are worried about possible complaints, requests for retroactive compensation, or challenges to current contract arrangements that do not incorporate equitable participation as a result of this attention. Sanders' success has drawn attention from player representatives throughout the league, and many have reportedly studied the contract structure to apply to their own clients. This has led to a game-share attitude that goes beyond individual contracts and raises important issues regarding revenue sharing and player remuneration plans for the league as a whole.
Make no mistakes about it. Yes, Shedeur Sanders was a fifth-round pick, but he ain't never been a fifth-round talent. That's why in his mind, he is saying, I can change a franchise if you give me the opportunity to.
The on-field dynamics have added another layer of complexity to the Sanders situation, creating both validation and concern for different stakeholders within the organization and league. His preseason performance created a mixed narrative that different parties could interpret according to their existing positions on his contract and role. Sanders' impressive debut against the Carolina Panthers, completing 14 of 23 passes for 138 yards and 2 touchdowns, demonstrated his potential and justified the Browns' investment in his innovative contract structure. The performance showed that his college success could translate to professional football, supporting arguments that his draft slide was indeed unfair and potentially discriminatory. However, his struggles in the final preseason game against the Los Angeles Rams, where he took 5 sacks and completed only 10 of 18 passes for 95 yards with 1 interception provided ammunition for critics who questioned the entire arrangement. This performance highlighted concerns about his pocket presence and decision-making under pressure that had been raised during the draft process. Former NFL quarterback Robert Griffin III became a vocal defender of Sanders during this period, arguing that the team was setting him up for failure by not providing adequate support during his difficult performances. This created additional media controversy and forced Cleveland coaches to address conspiracy theories about their handling of Sanders, further complicating the team's management of the situation.
So when people say, hey, they're setting him up for failure, this is what they're talking about. I believe the Browns have good intentions for all the quarterbacks in their room.
The international implications of Sanders' contract have also drawn attention from global sports business analysts and organizations. His global endorsement potential, leveraged through Nike's international campaigns, and his 5.7 million Instagram followers with 15% international engagement demonstrates how modern athlete brands transcend traditional geographic boundaries. This global reach amplifies both the value and the threat that Sanders represents to traditional NFL structures as it creates revenue streams that extend far beyond typical team-controlled markets. The international dimension becomes particularly significant when considering that Sanders' jersey sales have reportedly been strong in markets like the UK, Germany, and Brazil, where NFL viewership has been growing. This global appeal creates value that traditional contract structures weren't designed to capture, supporting arguments for innovative arrangements like Sanders' equity clause. Looking toward future CBA negotiations, Sanders' contract is expected to become a significant talking point that could reshape the fundamental structure of player compensation. Analysts predict the clause could spark debates about caps on nil revenue shares or formal definitions of equity clauses. The 2026 CBA discussions may need to address whether such arrangements should be limited, regulated, or formally incorporated into league structures as standard options for players. The precedent extends beyond football to other professional sports, with basketball, baseball, and soccer leagues watching the Sanders experiment closely. Successful implementation of equity-based compensation in NFL contracts could lead to similar demands from athletes in other sports, potentially reshaping professional athletics compensation across multiple industries.
That's what Shedeur said. Now, when you couple that, see, back then we didn't understand what he was asking for in his contract. When you couple that information that I just gave you guys, right?
The NFL's final response to this challenge will likely determine the league's relationship with its players for years to come. Whether they choose to embrace these innovations as beneficial for league growth or resist them as threats to traditional power structures will reveal much about professional sports' willingness to evolve with changing cultural and economic realities. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content. Perhaps most importantly, Sanders' contract shows how athlete empowerment has evolved from individual negotiation to systematic change.